Hi, I'm Valerie Scott. I grew up in Manchester, and I went to Manchester High School. I came to MCC in 1978, the fall of 1978, after graduating high school. I attended 2 full semesters before I went to the Down East program in fall of 1979.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit what the Down East program was, how you got involved in it,
Okay.
and what...
Down East was a special program started by Jay Stager, who is an associate professor of philosophy here at MCC at that time. Jay ran, and I guess still runs, Hidden Valley Camp up in Freedom, Maine, which during the summer is a camp for 150 or 200 students to do all those fun camp things. He decided to create a semester each fall for students to come from MCC, although we had students from other areas attend too. It was an opportunity for 21 students to live in the 400 wooded acres of Hidden Valley Camp. We started an intentional community by living there. We didn't know each other ahead of time. There might have been a couple people who knew each other a little bit, but once we got up there, it was a whole different ballgame. An intentional community means that we started a community with the idea that everyone would have a role. The goals were educational, to study utopian ideas in intentional communities while participating in the formation of one, to learn firsthand the delights and problems of intense group living, and we did, to experience academic tasks in a small, highly personalized setting without the usual distractions of family, TV, jobs, suburban roles, and old habits. You have to remember this is before the time of reality TV, before the time of personal computers, and really before the time of cell phones. So to say we were isolated is putting it lightly. Our job was to be students, and although we started an intentional community, we always had the knowledge that it was temporary and we were there for the purpose of learning, which didn't stop the learning from occurring. We had different religions come in, and for the amount of time that they would be there, we would be that religion. That included everything from Hindu to Buddhism to Sufi dancing, and to some a little less conventional. We also went to the Shakers of Sabbath Day Lake and met the few that were still there. But we had other assignments. We lived in a cabin that was made by campers over a couple summers, done the way the pioneers did it. They used the tools that were only available for the pioneers. They created this cabin by cutting down one log at a time, skinning it, bringing it up the mountain by mule, and created a beautiful cabin. Our role was to live in that cabin for 3 days, experiencing Thoreau's world. We were also supposed to read Thoreau's on Walden Pond during that time. No heat, no electricity, our job, no bathroom. We had to bring up the supplies that it would take to create fire and to cook and the food, and if we didn't do it, we didn't survive. It was very simple. The experience for each person was pretty exciting. Some not so exciting for them, but it was still exciting when you see the range of how people were affected by it.
So, 2 questions.
Okay.
A, how did you first hear about the program, and why did you decide to do this?
Okay. To be honest with you, I'm not remembering. It must have been an advertisement in the school paper or some kind of a notice around campus that I saw and thought, I need to try something different. It just fit my personality. I applied, and my congratulation letter that I was accepted pretty much says that. Congratulations, you've been accepted. Now that you can stop jumping for joy, here's the nitty-gritty stuff. I think I was looking for something. It involved a lot of self-exploration. It involved a lot of interpersonal communications. It also involved developing relationships with other people that I felt I needed at the time, and it would be good for me. I was also interested in learning about the other religions, the communities. I had always wanted to go to Israel and live on a kibbutz, and to me this was like a starter for that.
And did you get college credit for this program?
We did. We got 15 college credits. There were 5 actual credit courses. Some people couldn't believe it because we were pretty much hippies living out in the woods, doing hippie kind of things out in the woods. But we learned by doing, no ifs, ands, or buts, and came back with a full 15 credits, whole semester's worth of credits. Yeah.
Chuck, do you have anything before I move on to a different topic?
I mean, that's a pretty courageous thing to do that, to go straight up in the middle of the woods somewhere like that. When you reflect on it, do you think it was kind of not as advertised, or you were satisfied with what you got?
I think I hadn't thought of it as courageous. That's an interesting way to put it. I was 19 at the time. I was one of the youngest people. I really didn't know what I was getting into. Even though it might have been told that there were other ages, I expected everyone to be my age, and then I turned out to be one of the youngest. That had a lot of adjusting. One woman was there with her daughter, so we had a 6-year-old go through the process with us. That was very interesting. But if I look back if I was to review my life and think of the 5 best experiences of my life, I would definitely put Down East as one of them. When we got there, because it was still warm, we could live in any of the cabins. We could live alone. It was the first time I got to live alone. I lived in the back of Mother Hubbard's cupboard, which was the concession stand, and I loved it. It was fantastic. As it got colder, obviously we needed to start shutting cabins, and there was no wood stove there, so I needed to move into a cabin that would provide heat, and eventually they had us shut water at different parts. And the day before Thanksgiving, the program ended because it was just too cold to be up there.
Was Jay Steger the only faculty member from MCC there, or were there others?
Well, Jay's wife also had a big part in it, Shirley Steger. Not that she was faculty, but she ran a lot of the interpersonal kind of programs, and I would say that she was just as much a participant as she was faculty. He also had other faculty come up. There was 2 psychologists that came up, Sebastian Moudre and Paul Cohen, who wasn't faculty. I think he was a private practicing psychologist. This is during the time of Est and Gestalt, and they came up for an intense weekend of putting us together as a group, breaking us apart as a group, reforming us as a group, ripping us apart as a group. If there was one part I could have done without, it probably would have been that part. Very difficult time. No other faculty that I recall came up. It was pretty much the religions coming in. That was, yeah. Okay.
I do remember somebody referring to coming up there to talk in our review, but I don't. It wasn't Sebastian, since we didn't know.
He does say something about a Lowry, is it a Bob Lowry? But I honestly don't remember that person coming up, so I'm not going to.
What was the transition like? I mean, going from that back into the classroom?
The transition was very difficult. I totally understand how astronauts have to go through what's it called? Decompression time. To leave that kind of isolation of 3 months with no outside communication, or very, very limited outside communication, to just going back into society where just driving the car was a little overwhelming. The TV, the news was too hard to watch. It was something that if we almost needed debriefing. It was very, very, very difficult. To make it harder on myself, because that seemed to be what I liked to do, I had, like I said, I wanted to go to live on a kibbutz. The time was right. I had a little money put away that I could do this, and one of our assignments after leaving was to go live on an intentional community. So that was the time for me. Off I went to Israel, living on a kibbutz for about 6 weeks. It was supposed to be 3 months. Ironically, it wasn't the experience I was looking for, so I left and did do some traveling. And then I came back, and at that point, it was a really difficult re-entry. It really took a couple months to figure out where I was each night when I went to bed, where I woke up, what I had to do, what language I was, people were speaking around me. That was hard.
What do you think Jay's overall goal was? What was he trying to accomplish with the students in that program?
I think Jay was trying to give us an opportunity to not just learn in a classroom through a book, but to experience life to the fullest, whether it be through religion, through interpersonal relationships, through one person at Down East kept saying, I like to be stretched. I like it being stretched, and I believe that Jay stretched us. Some of the experiences that we were put in, when you live with these people and you're isolated, you can't hide. So you deal with it, or it just never ends. You are living it until you resolve it. It's also a way to avoid things, ironically. When you live in a community, you can, and this happened to us, there's always the feeling like, well, someone will get that done. Just little tasks like maybe the dishes needed to be done. Well, someone will do it. And if you live that way, no one will do it because it's always someone else's job. And that's just dishes. That's not the heavy stuff. So I think Jay was providing a setting for us to have an experience that would last a lifetime, and with me, it was accomplished. Yeah.
Are you in touch with the people?
Not anymore. Over time, we've lost touch. There were two that I was in high school with, and they still live in the area. So one I did see at a high school reunion, his behavior was, shall we say, not pleasant a lot of times. And it was intentional. So I called him on it. 30 years later, I was able to say, what was the deal with you acting that way? And so he fessed up. But it took 30 years to get resolution on that.
What's that back of you?
In my tag sailing days, I came across a T-shirt that has this logo on it. Now, this must have been meant for the kids going to camp. It wasn't for us, but it truly depicts what Hidden Valley Camp was like for us. Leaving civilization off to the world, there were some teepees on the grounds, and there were actually some people that lived in the teepees. You did jump into a journey.
It says something about the period, and because I think said Lowell, the president prior, and he wasn't there,
Yeah.
encouraged that kind of thing. And Jay could never pull that off today.
No. No.
It's unique to the period. Unfortunately, the presidents that came after
Yeah.
continued that.
Yeah.
So after you graduated from MCC.
After I graduated MCC, actually, I didn't actually graduate.
Okay.
I finished, but I transferred over to Eastern. I went to Eastern for 2 years and did get a bachelor's. And then I went on to social work. I had made a decision that was the career I wanted, and I went to the Yukon School of Social Work, graduated from that, hated it, and worked in the substance abuse field for 15 years, hating it, and finally made a big career change and became a graphic designer. All these years later, I applied for a job at MCC. In 1999, I'm hired as a graphic designer, through a part-time job as an ed assistant to be the graphic designer in continuing ed. I do the catalogs. I even teach in credit-free here and there, teaching the program that I lay out the catalogs in. And I've been here now 13 years. So to me, MCC is very much like the book called The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, where it's been here at different times of my life and offered me things that I've needed at that time, and it continues to provide that for me.
How did you first hear about the job for the graphic designer?
I had taken a class here on a program, and the woman who was running the class told me about the job and said, "Oh, you've got to apply for this." And I did, and at the time, the woman who was running, I had a job, and this was a part-time job, and the woman didn't even listen to me. She wouldn't even take my resume. If you work full-time, you can't do this job. But my resume had been submitted, and a year later, I got a call from the woman who was the director of continuing ed at that time and said, "We've got your resume. Are you still interested? The position's reopened." How often does opportunity knock twice? So again, I said yes. I talked with her, and lo and behold, the second time around, I got hired, and they can't get rid of me.
So the interview process just one-on-one with the director at the time?
The director and the director of Credit Free at that time, Dan Long. So, yeah.
And what, you've been here since 91, you said you?
99.
99.
Yeah.
So what changes have you seen in the college from the time you were hired
Well,
to
there's
the present day?
the changes have been the physical changes, mostly. We, meaning continuing ed, was housed down in the lower campus. In fact, when I finished MCC back in 70 or 81, they were talking about the new building that was going to be built, and I was sorry I was going to miss it. Well, that's referred to as the low building now, the new building. So we were on East Campus, living in the trailers, sort of, and obviously all these buildings being built was a big change. When I came on, they didn't have enough room for me, so they set up the computer in the conference room. That was my office, the conference room, which I loved. And I had all this room and me. But when we moved up, things changed. I had a real office, which was exciting. We interacted with everyone by that point because I wasn't isolated behind a computer in a room. Obviously, the amount of programs have expanded. I'm not as involved in that, being a graphic designer for continuing ed, but I'm doing some work with marketing right now. I've been there since October, helping to fill in the gaps, and so I've also been a part of a lot of things that have grown. MCC on Main has started, pieces like that.
How is it different or the same working for continuing ed versus marketing?
Continuing ed, I have a very set schedule in terms of I do this catalog at this time, this catalog at this time, and that's my job for part-time. Marketing, you take on whatever job comes through the door. Who's ever putting on an event or has a program starting or needs whatever they need, and it can be a brochure, a rack card, an ad, all those types of things, and you do interact with the whole rest of the college. So it's been an eye-opening experience, and political, and very political.
Is there any people you remember as standouts or any time you worked here?
When I came to MCC, I took art courses that were held at the Hartford Road campus. We were in the back. Bob Manning was my art history teacher. Very eccentric, very wonderful. There was one time in the art history class when he decided that he wasn't getting enough of a view of the class. So he took the folding chair, he put it on the table, got up on the table and sat, and he said, "Okay, this is good. Now I'm getting a sense." But he explained art in a way that no one else had, and his views were obviously controversial but very eye-opening, and that was a treat. There was also John and Suzanne Stevens, who were the art teachers at that time. Very different sense of art, both very committed to art and role models. All of them were role models to me.
Anything that you've produced over the years that stand out that that have made an impression on you, or that you say contribute to the overall college?
Well, I did the covers. Besides laying out the catalog, I did the covers for years and years of the Credit Free, and when the program enrollment increased, I always attributed that to the covers. Of course. Well, what else could it be? So I always felt like I was, and still feel, I'm the most unknown famous person on campus because my work is literally displayed everywhere on campus, including and the mall, and probably will be on MCC on Main, but no one knows who does it. So, yeah.
Any funny experiences you've had while you've been here, or like to share with us, or?
I think the whole Down East experience is probably something I could talk about. I could tell you one time in Down East, Jay also, besides all the things he does, he is a pilot and had a small plane, but he's quite the jokester. He was always a jokester. So Jay decided to take 3 of us on a little plane trip, and we were all very nervous. It was a very little plane, and somehow I managed to be in the front, and the two were in the back. So he's acting discombobulated, like he doesn't know what he's doing. He said, where are the directions? Would you find the directions? It asked me to open, and I believed him, of course, and we're screaming. And he did fly the plane as if he didn't know what he was doing. And we were all green by the time it was done, barely able to stand on our own two legs, praying to be on the ground.
Anything else you'd like to check? Anything else to throw in there?
I'm just going to ask a question. I mean, there are a number of you who are involved in graphic arts. Paula comes to mind. You,
Yeah, right.
And, just dropped his name. Does the graphic art work for the wine auction?
Ed Hogan.
Ed Hogan.
Yeah.
How does that? Do you guys have a working relationship? Are they pretty much? Are you separate, or how does that work?
Well, in marketing, Paul is the full-time, and I'm filling in as the part-time. And the director, Charlene, has pretty much decided what she does and what I do. She used to do the catalogs, but they don't seem to be doing the catalogs quite the way they were. There's been a change. Now there's an enrollment guide. So that's her baby, so to speak. And then I'm doing, like I said, the ads, the rack cards. And Ed does a lot of things I would call in the periphery. He's not doing for specific college events like we are, except the wine auction. So he'll come in and do those kinds of things. We're all colleagues. We all work together.
So is there anything you would like to add that we haven't covered, or you?
I want to go back to something about Down East, if that's all right, because I'm counting on your editing. Because we were so isolated, to go into town was a big deal. Obviously, we needed to get to the laundry. There was no laundry facilities at the camp. So once a week, we would drive in the school bus that was painted blue, except for the dinosaur painted on the side, go to Belfast and do our laundry. And because we had no other stimulation, we would just watch the dryer with our clothes and go, whoa, man, the clothes are going round, man. And then that was it. That was our excitement, and then we'd come back with clean clothes, hopefully. So.
Now, you did mention, being the youngest there. I'm just curious as to, did that intimidate you, or you were okay with that?
I was intimidated. I think I felt very nervous about the whole situation, and I think we were all trying to figure out where we fit in, how we belong, whether we even liked each other, and to be the one with the least number of life experiences. I felt I had some trouble with that. Now, when I look back, I'm older than Jay and Shirley were at that time, and they were the elders of the group, so that's painful on that level. But I still feel it's probably the best that it happened to me at that age, even though it might have made it a little more difficult. I treasure that experience, and I can't actually imagine it being different than what it was.
How long that program ran, Bill?
No, I don't. I mean, I can remember hearing about it at the time, but
I think it ran about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. In fall of 1979, we were the third group, and I know there was one more after us, but I don't know if there was a second after, one more after that. I think it died. And I don't know why it stopped. Did you guys hear anything?
probably, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.